It's commonly known that people that were the president of clubs or had other leadership positions in college or after college tend to get the best positions out of school. Today I'm going to go over, if you didn't have one of those high-profile positions as the club president or some other role like that, how you can actually overcome that. And that's through demonstrating that you were a mentor of others. Now, what is being a mentor? And let's kind of develop this topic, because being a mentor is a little bit different than being the leader of a club. Obviously, the leader of a club's providing the strategic direction, where a mentor is kind of jumping in and helping to fill stop gaps and support the organization by propping people up and getting them up to speed. So the reason companies love having mentors is someone that mentors others actually demonstrating that they are a leader. Now, someone that was the president of a club could have, in fact, just won a popularity contest. And if you're a good interviewer on the interviewer side or employer side, you're going to ask a lot of probing questions to see what that person did to drive that organization forward. But if you don't have that leadership or that presidential situation in your resume, we can still do well if you were a trainer. And so today I'm going to develop what employers look for and how you can get it across to them that you are, in fact, a leader, even though you lacked a formalized position. To start this off, I'm going to go back in my own career, back when I first received W-2 wages. I had made it past being a babysitter, which was providing me with sporadic income, to finally become a bag boy for our local grocery store. So my first day on the job, I go in and speak with the assistant manager, and he calls in Andy and he says, "Andy, we need you to teach Todd the ropes." So Andy then takes me out. We begin the day by doing carts. Now, back in those days, there weren't the parking spot that was dedicated to housing the carts. So the carts kind of would roll around the parking lot if we didn't collect them soon enough. And then customers would get upset if they got a ding in their car. It wasn't very good for your bagging career. So Andy and I hustled to get all the carts together. Then we went in and bagged for a bit to help reduce the lines the cashiers were experiencing. And then someone broke a jar in aisle 4 and we had to go clean that up. And at the end of the day, then Andy taught me how to use the punch clock. And so that was my training for the day, was Andy taking me around and showing me the ropes. Now, what I didn't know at the time was the assistant manager had picked Andy for a very specific reason. Andy was their star or best hidden gem employee that the grocery store had. And by having me trained by Andy, I always thought the norms for working at the position, at least for the first month, were that you always hustled when you were at the grocery store. So by putting me with Andy instead of a low performer, I could have very easily been doing the carts at a much slower rate. When I had to clean up in the aisle, I could have gone in the back and been missing for a half hour or longer. So by having Andy train me, I learned this norm of being a high performer because I was trained by a high performer. So that's where I thought the expectations were set. That Andy in your organization provides a lot of value to that firm because that person is instilling and training the other people on how to behave at a very high level. Later, after a year, Andy would leave and then I would become the person in that role. And then hopefully there was someone after Todd to train the next people later on how to perform at a high level in that role. Now I'm going to go into leadership and why that's so important. So the reason companies love leaders, the biggest reason is leaders just solve problems that you didn't even know you had and never even were brought to your attention because the leader just solves it. They also elevate others by training them. They also provide the strategic direction for the business. So all organizations need leaders, need high performers, need people that they can develop to be the future people that are running the business, because at the end of the day, all businesses are is a collection of people. When you're the employer and you're on the other side of the table, you can't just ask someone, okay, so tell me in your last role, did you perform below average relative to your peers, at average, or were you above average relative to your peers? Because everyone that's asked that question is going to respond with, I performed at the highest level anyone's ever seen anyone apply in that prior role. And so the way we can kind of back into determining whether or not someone's a leader or not is by asking mentor type questions. Before we get into the questions, let's go and look at the two kind of most common reasons why people don't do well on questions that are asked about being a mentor. The first is that they've never really thought or developed, because people don't think in an interview that it's important to have trained others or have taught others how to do things. It's one of those things where you're thinking about yourself and what you can bring to the table, but you're not thinking about what you did for others. It's just kind of a psychological thing that we're missing. And the other piece is a lot of people don't fully develop their answers. So they'll just stop short because they'll think, yeah, I trained Bob on accounting one time, but you don't fully develop your answers. And as a result of not fully developing that answer, you don't get your answer to that leadership level. You keep your level of your response down in the murky zone where it's very difficult for the employer to know how important the story was. The questions that you're most likely going to get when it's a question about being a mentorship type situation that they're after, one is tell me a time you trained somebody in the past, and the other would be tell me about a time you coached a coworker through a difficult problem they had. In either of those situations, they can have multiple derivations of either of those questions. However, that's kind of what they're going to be asking about, is how you helped or coached or trained another coworker. Now, the important thing to realize here is when they ask you this question, your response needs to be about your most recent position. And the reason for that is if you were the trainer 2 positions before, but now in your most recent role, you weren't the trainer, was there a performance drop off, or did you have a Peters principle out where you no longer were performing at a high level because you reached kind of your ceiling? Those are the type of things that the interviewer is going to be trying to figure out. And so therefore you want to make sure that your story you're providing is from your most recent position. So now I'm going to go into the story I promised you for my career that kind of was a mentor style response I gave and how it was very impactful for the job interviews I was taking on after graduate school. I was in a role as a staff accountant or junior accountant at a medium-sized firm, and the CFO put in her 2 weeks notice and left after 2 weeks. The company begged to get her to stay longer. That was not part of what she could do given her future role, and she was like, I'm out of here after 2 weeks. Well, the company was caught flat-footed and they weren't really prepared to replace her, so it took them about 6 weeks to find a new CFO. Now, they brought the new CFO in, but in the meantime, the CFO had asked me if I would spend the final 2 weeks of the CFO's job and kind of shadow her and learn as much as I could about what she was doing and fulfill that role for that gap in between. So I actually had to be trained by the CFO, kind of understand as much institutional knowledge as I could about what that role was and what was important, the various nuances about our accounting system that were critical. And then when the new CFO came in, I had to train, and I created basically manuals for him for when he came in so that I could teach him on how everything worked. I was kind of the king for a month while I was training the new CFO because I was the person in the organization that everybody take a bullet for, because without what I knew to train the new CFO, the company was going to come to a standstill. And I was able to get that done, and the new CFO up and ready in the new position. As you can see from this example, you're not always training downwards. Sometimes you can be training your new boss on the position they have, and I was obviously more than happy to do that, as it helped me grow as a person by mentoring my future boss. And he was eternally grateful for me having done that for him. It's very important, though, that we think about mentor answers, especially if we didn't have a formalized leadership position and we have to make up for that. We know that's a weakness we have. Mentoring is a way we can make up for that. So you want to fully develop the story that you have, and you either use it to answer a mentor question, or in a lot of cases you can use it to answer a leadership question, and you'll be surprised when you answer with this format how successful you'll be and how excited your future employer will be about hearing that answer. At Interview Expert, we teach people that there are only 14 concepts that an interviewer can ask you about. Everything else is just a derivation of those 14 concepts. So we teach you how to prepare a story for each of those 14 questions, and therefore in doing so, you become hyper prepared for that interview. If you would like more information about these 14 points or anything else interview related, feel free to subscribe to our channel. We always appreciate that. Or go to our website and find out more about our training. And again, thank you for watching this video. Clean up in aisle 5. All right, I'm on it, and I'm going to take Derek out there with me too.